The moment the young couple stepped into the vacant two-story home on the edge of South Fulton, they exchanged a silent glance that said everything. The air inside the house was thick, stale, and strangely bitter. A sour odor clung to the walls, as if it had been sitting there for years without fresh circulation. The couple hesitated. Malik Porter instinctively reached for the door, tempted to step back out. His girlfriend, Tiana Bradford, lifted her hand slightly, steadying him. They had promised themselves that they would stay polite, no matter what condition the house was in. They tried to focus on the structure itself: the tall ceilings, the large windows, the classic 1970s architecture that offered charm and potential. But the deeper they walked in, the more apparent it became that the house had been neglected. Dust layered the floorboards. Old newspapers were stacked in piles. The kitchen smelled faintly of mold. Still, Malik and Tiana pushed forward with the tour. The seller, a wiry middle-aged man named Lionel Blair, guided them through the rooms quickly, almost impatiently. He acted as if he wanted to finish the tour as fast as possible. It was as if he was relieved that someone had finally shown interest in the listing. The house had been on the market for only 2 days, but he mentioned repeatedly that he needed to sell it immediately. When they reached the far back room, Tiana froze mid-step. A figure lay on a twin mattress pushed against the wall. At first, she did not understand what she was looking at. Then the realization dawned. An older woman lay curled beneath a thin blanket. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes concave, her arms thin like branches. A faint whimper escaped her lips. Malik stared in disbelief. The odor in the house suddenly made sense. Lionel snapped at the woman harshly, muttering under his breath about her inability to move quickly. He scolded her for simple things, like breathing too loudly and shifting the blanket. It was clear he saw her as an inconvenience. Malik felt his stomach twist. Tiana placed her hand over her mouth, trying not to cry. The couple stepped out of the room to gather themselves. Malik whispered, "Tiana, we need to leave. This is not right. Something is going on here." Tiana nodded, but her brows pulled together. "We should finish the tour. He looks desperate. Maybe that woman is his relative." They walked toward the living room, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in their chests. The price of the house was shockingly low for the area. They assumed Lionel needed money for the woman's medical care. It seemed like a tragic but understandable explanation. Malik examined the walls, trying to imagine the house renovated. He saw potential in the space. The price was unbelievably low, low enough to change their lives if they invested wisely. They had been dreaming of owning a home for years, saving slowly, scraping together what they could while juggling part-time jobs and rented apartments. They returned to the kitchen when Lionel suddenly delivered news that left both of them speechless. "Oh, and I should mention," he said casually, "the house comes with her. That is part of the deal." Malik blinked hard. "Sir, I do not understand. What do you mean the house comes with her?" Lionel shrugged. "She stays. She cannot go anywhere. She does not have long left anyway. Whoever buys the house takes responsibility for her. Full ownership of the property is yours, and she will not be a burden for long." Tiana felt the room spin. "That cannot be legal," she said softly. Lionel waved dismissively. "It is perfectly fine. She signed forms years ago. My conscience is clean." Malik stepped back. "We are not buying a home that includes a person. We cannot do that." They thanked him quickly and headed toward the front door. As they reached the sidewalk, Malik exhaled deeply. "That poor woman," he said. "She can barely move." Tiana shook her head sadly. "But the house was so affordable, and it really does have potential." They stood there for a long moment, torn between conscience and opportunity. Malik started to turn toward their car when Tiana suddenly grabbed his arm. "Malik," she said, "I think we should buy it." He stared at her, shocked. But as she rushed back toward Lionel, he found himself following. Something in her voice told him she knew exactly what she was doing. Within 10 minutes, they had agreed to buy the home. The car ride home was filled with nervous excitement. Malik and Tiana talked about the possibilities. They spoke about helping the bedridden woman, whoever she was. They assured themselves that even if her time was short, they would make sure she spent her final days with dignity and comfort. The next morning, Tiana called her mother to tell her everything. She expected shock or judgment. Instead, her mother was moved by their compassion. She explained that she had been quietly saving money for Tiana's future home. She had not wanted to interfere until she knew her daughter was ready to settle down. Hearing the story convinced her that Malik and Tiana were mature enough to handle responsibility. She offered to contribute to the down payment. 2 days later, the paperwork was underway. By the end of the week, Malik and Tiana officially owned the home on Sagebrush Lane. Lionel hurried through the sale as if he could not wait to remove himself from the place. The moment the documents were signed, he handed over the keys and left without another word. When they returned to the house that evening, Tiana's mother, Patrice Bradford, insisted on coming along. She wanted to see the property her daughter had purchased. Malik opened the door and the familiar smell hit them again. Patrice winced. They walked through the rooms until they reached the back bedroom. Patrice stepped inside, expecting to see a typical sick woman. Instead, she froze. Her breath caught. She whispered, "Sariah?" The frail woman on the mattress opened her eyes. Confusion flashed across her face before fear took over. She turned away, ashamed, trembling as if she wanted to disappear beneath the blankets. Malik and Tiana stared, bewildered. They had not expected Patrice to know her. "Sariah," Patrice repeated, her voice cracking. "How did you end up like this?" Sariah swallowed hard, trying to speak but faltering. Patrice stepped forward, knelt beside her, and reached for her hand. All Sariah could do was cry. The young couple glanced at one another again. They quietly stepped out of the room to give the two women privacy. Patrice had not seen Sariah in 20 years. They had been inseparable during their early 20s. Then one terrible misunderstanding shattered their friendship. Sariah had fallen in love with Patrice's brother, Caleb Bradford. They were planning a future together until a drunken argument at a party ruined everything. Caleb had kissed another woman that night. Someone had taken a photo. The image spread among their friends. Sariah refused to forgive him, no matter how many times he apologized. She left the city within a week. Patrice had lost her dear friend, and her brother had lost the love of his life. Caleb spent years regretting everything. He tried searching for Sariah, but she had disappeared. Now Patrice was looking at her former friend, who had once been full of laughter and ambition, lying frail and neglected in this room. Patrice felt her chest tighten with grief. They spoke for nearly an hour. While they talked, Malik opened the windows and Tiana began cleaning the house with urgency. She scrubbed the floors, wiped the walls, and removed piles of trash. She did not care how long it would take. Later, when Patrice stepped out of the bedroom, her eyes were puffy but determined. She said, "We are not leaving her like this. We are helping her immediately." Malik nodded. "We plan to." Tiana added, "We will take care of her. She will stay here with us." Patrice shook her head. "No, she belongs with someone who will fight for her." She looked directly at Malik. "She belongs with my brother." Caleb Bradford arrived at the house the next morning. He rushed in without knocking, unable to contain himself. His heart pounded so hard that he felt dizzy. When he reached the back bedroom, he froze, just like Patrice had. Sariah turned her head slowly toward him. The moment their eyes met, her lips quivered. Caleb dropped to his knees beside the mattress. "Sariah," he said, his voice cracking. "What happened to you?" She covered her face with her hands, tears soaking her palms. Caleb gently pried her hands away and pressed them against his chest. He wanted to apologize again for what he had done all those years ago. He wanted to tell her that he never stopped thinking about her, but the words could not form. He felt too ashamed, too guilty, too broken. Sariah, too, was battling a storm of emotions. She thought she had hardened her heart over the years. She believed she had buried every remnant of love she once held for him. But seeing him now, after 2 decades of loneliness, awakened all the feelings she thought she had buried forever. Caleb stayed by her side the entire day. Meanwhile, Malik and Tiana focused on transforming the house. They cleaned the carpets. They replaced the stained curtains. They disinfected the kitchen thoroughly. They opened all the windows to allow fresh air to circulate for the first time in years. By evening, the house felt lighter. Still old. Still in need of work. But no longer suffocating. Tiana prepared a soft meal for Sariah and brought it to her bedside. She fed her slowly, carefully, making sure not to overwhelm her. Caleb watched silently. This was the woman he had loved all his life. This was the woman whose absence had haunted him every day since she left. He hated the thought of her suffering alone. Over the next several days, Caleb worked tirelessly to get Sariah admitted to a rehabilitation clinic. Her condition was serious, but not irreversible. The doctor explained that with proper care, she could regain strength. Her muscles had weakened due to extended neglect, not an incurable illness. She needed nutrition, therapy, and a clean environment. Caleb paid for her care without hesitation. As Sariah settled into a private room at the facility, she held onto his hand. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb looked at her, eyes wet. "Because I should have done it 20 years ago." Sariah spent the next 3 months in rehabilitation. The transformation was astonishing. Her cheeks regained color. Her body grew stronger. Her hair was washed, trimmed, and styled. Her voice, once weak and strained, became warm again. Every day, Caleb visited her. He brought her flowers, warm blankets, books. He stayed from morning until evening, refusing to leave unless she insisted. Sometimes they talked for hours. Other times, they simply sat together in silence. Malik and Tiana visited often as well, bringing meals, offering encouragement, and helping coordinate her eventual return home. They had taken responsibility for the house willingly, but the deeper reward had become watching the pieces of a broken past fall gently back into place. As Sariah healed, she began to open up about her life. She confessed that after leaving the city, she had fallen into a confusing and unhealthy marriage with Lionel. He did not care for her emotional well-being, and he valued control more than compassion. When she was struck by a delivery truck one afternoon, her life changed forever. Lionel saw her injury as a burden, not a call for support. He forced her to sign paperwork that transferred property into his name. He withheld her access to medical care and isolated her from friends. Sariah spoke through tears for the first time about the pain she had endured. Caleb listened, his fists clenched. He vowed that he would never let her feel alone again. On the final day of her rehabilitation, Sariah stood from her wheelchair slowly but confidently. Caleb held her waist gently as she took her first steps toward the sunlight pouring through the window. She smiled. For the first time in years, the reunion on Sagebrush Lane was emotional. Malik and Tiana greeted Sariah at the front door with bright smiles. Patrice embraced her tightly. Sariah felt like she was entering a new chapter of her life, not returning to the site of her suffering. Caleb had prepared a surprise for her. The back bedroom had been completely renovated. The old mattress was gone. Fresh paint covered the walls. A new bed with soft bedding sat beneath the window. A vase of lilies rested on a small table. The air smelled of vanilla and lemon, not mildew and decay. Sariah burst into tears. Caleb wrapped his arms around her. "You deserve more than this," he whispered. "But this is where we start." Over the next year, Sariah regained her independence. Her legs strengthened, her mind sharpened. She took sewing classes. She began baking again. She attended community events with Patrice and helped Tiana garden in the new backyard. She became a cherished part of the neighborhood. As for Caleb and Sariah, their love blossomed quietly but steadily. They did not rush things. They healed old wounds first. Then one evening, at a small family dinner hosted by Malik and Tiana, Caleb knelt down beside her chair. His hands trembled. "Sariah," he said softly, "I have waited 20 years to say this. Will you marry me?" Her breath hitched. She nodded. Tears fell freely down her cheeks. "Yes," she said, "I will." The table erupted with applause and laughter. Malik hugged Caleb. Tiana wiped tears from her eyes. Patrice lifted her wineglass in celebration. That night felt like the ending of a tragedy and the beginning of a miracle. 1 year later, something unexpected happened. Lionel boarded a flight to Chicago for a business conference. As he walked through the aisle searching for his seat, he noticed a woman dressed elegantly in a white blouse and a gold scarf. Her hair was neatly pressed, her makeup flawless. A tall man stood beside her, adjusting her carry-on bag in the overhead bin. Lionel froze. His jaw dropped. It was Sariah. Alive. Healthy. Radiant. She looked nothing like the woman he had left behind. She looked younger, stronger, and happier than she had been in years. He stared, unable to believe it. She glanced in his direction and paused. Her eyes flickered with recognition. Not anger, not fear, just calm acknowledgement. Then she turned her attention back to Caleb, who whispered something that made her laugh softly. They sat together, fingers intertwined. Lionel swallowed hard. He realized that he had thrown away the greatest blessing he ever had. He finally understood that love required patience, sacrifice, and empathy. Things he had never provided. As the plane took off, he sat alone, staring ahead, his heart heavy with regret. Caleb and Sariah, meanwhile, leaned against one another peacefully, savoring the life they had reclaimed. The pain of the past had been replaced with a future full of hope. And none of it would have happened without the courage of one young couple who chose kindness over convenience.